presentation on the effects of social media on our empathy. Before I dive into much, I'm going to first introduce a few terms. We've got compassion fatigue. It is a condition that reduces our ability to feel empathy and show emotion towards other people. It's a condition that kind of damages our relationship and shows that you're out of emotional gas. Next, we've got social media, which is essentially any online platform that allows contact with a wide group of people. I've got examples here: TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, etc. And then last here we've got self-care, which is just it's a group and variety of ways for people to take care of themselves and recover and recuperate their mental states, and in some cases their physical states. And before I dive, before I go any further, I'd like to define empathy because that is the big focus of this slideshow. It is an abstract concept that we use to describe the way that we are able to step into each other's shoes and feel for other people. It's essential for building relationships with other people as well as maintaining them. And we most often use it in the phrase, walk in another person's shoes, usually followed by before you judge them, as it's something that us humans are especially good at doing. Here we have compassion fatigue, which is it's a form of emotional burnout, and it's usually described as a physical, spiritual, and emotional exhaustion that causes a complete lack of strength, and it kind of creates a downward spiral, as once you're stuck in the loop of compassion fatigue, it's harder and harder to climb out, as it's harder to relate to and talk with other people. And it creates a sort of, right there it says loss of productivity, a depression, jumpiness, and it all stems from just not being able to handle emotions the way that a person normally would. Now, compassion fatigue can come from a number of sources. However, it's normally experienced by medical professionals due to this first bullet point here, an overexposure of indirect stress or trauma. And that stems from the fact that these professionals are placed with people who have, in the case of nurses, they've usually gone through serious injuries, ranging from simple broken noses to devastating car crashes and paralysis. And in the case of therapists, it can be all sorts of mental difficulties. And these can and this indirect exposure, although it isn't exactly happening to the professional in this case, it's something that they use that we naturally use our empathy to understand and to sort of put ourselves in that person's shoes so that we can help them, because it's necessary to understand that in the case of a nurse, that your patient is feeling pain in order for you to help them overcome that pain or heal from the injury that they've experienced. And so using your empathy in that way kind of creates stacks of stress and indirect pain, as you're, in a sense, also feeling that same pain. And here I'm going to go over some of the tropes of social media. It's often seen that people will post their best days, their good trips, their worst days, when they get into car crashes, when a relative dies, etc. People will on the internet be mean for whatever reason or motivation they have. And these all have their own effects on us when we view social media. If we are seeing people post good days after good days after good days, although each person is essentially only posting this once, you're seeing it across many different people. And if you in particular are not going on those vacations to exotic places or have or getting married or whatever it is, then it can create a create a sense of lesser being, um, and put emotional stress on us. When people post their worst days, it's not dissimilar to the kind of experience that the ones I described earlier with the nurse and feeling for their patient, because you're seeing in most cases a friend or a relative or someone that you have some connection to who's experiencing something painful. Um, and if you were to reply to them and try to comfort them, then you are now using your empathy and exposing yourself to that pain secondhand. Um, and then those criticisms and personal attacks I list on the third there, that's simple enough. Being emotionally attacked online hurts, even if you try to put it off. This here is a study done by Tamara Blakemore and Kylie Iglias. I believe I'm pronouncing their names correctly. And a, it describes what a few college students experienced over social media during, I believe, a semester. I don't know the exact time frame. Um, and here they explain that the use of it was emotionally draining and that there was a constant bombardment of high level emotions. By the way, they were required to use it for a certain number of hours each day. Um, and so they were required to expose themselves to this. But the bombardment of high level emotions left them left them bereaved and overwhelmed. And the sheer volume was enough to it sort of damage them, emotionally speaking. Um, and so, with all of this talk of how our emotions can be damaged, it's important to cover ways of self-care, because it's almost impossible for us to try and avoid these. Social media is everywhere. It's impossible to necessarily avoid it, and so it's important to focus on self-care. And here we have uh, some of the results that are seen from self-care. This graph on the right, I'll move my picture to show it a bit better. Whoa. This graph on the right is it's essentially a loop that nurses found themselves experiencing during this workshop referenced at the bottom left. Uh, and when the nurses went positive in self-care, they noticed an improvement in self-being, which resulted in better communication with their and empathetic feelings, better patient satisfaction, and improved job satisfaction, which looped back around to better well-being. And when the nurses went negative on self-care and focused more on their jobs and not on themselves, they experienced burnout, worse communication, less empathy, poor patient satisfaction, and reduced job satisfaction, which again, now that you're not satisfied with your job, would loop back around to burnout. And this is just one study that kind of exemplifies how self-care can help overcome this sort of compassion fatigue that's so commonly seen in these fields and is uh, not recognized as an experience that most people go through on a daily basis just through the use of social media. Um, and as this last slide here, I'm going to go over some of the more common methods of self-care. We have exercise, vacations, dating, hobbies, and time away from social media and time with devices turned off. All of these can work. It depends more on what you do as a person and what you prefer, because not one of these is going to work for every person, and it's important to do, as the big picture on the right here says, what makes you happy. Uh, so real quick, we've just got to recap. We covered empathy and what it is, compassion fatigue and how it drains our emotions and makes it harder to live with and be around and form relationships with other people. Social media and some of the ways that it can drain us. as well as a variety of ways for us to recover ourselves by practicing self-care. And in conclusion, from the research I found, we as humans have a natural inclination to feel for each other and attempt to support one another. An extended practice of this feat without reward or break can whittle us down until we are no longer capable of that task. And the internet and online media are sources that indirectly expose us to the task of empathizing with other humans, and if we carelessly use it, we will end up drained and irritated without knowing why. This can be resolved by taking time away from media and by taking time to care for ourselves and experience joy in the ways that we most want to by the use of self-care methods. So we're excited, and that's all.